The following presentation was recorded live in Las Vegas, Nevada for the 27th Annual International Association of Square Dance Callers. This is tape 20, Modules.
Calling is an activity that requires us to be in total control of the dance situation as it occurs. I think everybody will agree that once we lose that control, we're treading on thin ice. Calling is not only adjusting the degree of difficulty in each call, it is also using the methods of choreographic management that we have. And as most of you know, how many have been through a caller school? Almost everybody. That's beautiful. Is there anybody here that is a pure sight caller? Pure sight? Pretty much? You don't use any modules at all? Singing calls? Do you do singing calls? You don't do singing calls. That's interesting. Uh-huh. You're at C3 now? Uh-huh, okay. You use modules and singing calls. That's probably where most of us start. There are 5 recognized methods of managing choreography or staying in control. CALLERLAB recognizes 5. Of these 5, we're going to discuss today the use of modules. And I think I'm going to spend a few minutes defining what modules are and sort of standardizing the terminology that Cal and Norm will be able to use, and hopefully you'll be able to understand. First of all, what are modules? What are modules? By definition, a module is a grouping of calls, a call or a grouping of calls, that moves dancers from one known phaser to the same or to a different phaser. Or, in short, it's a group of calls that does something. It has an objective. And once we find what that objective is, then we can categorize modules. We can put them in little bundles. Some of the more familiar modules that we play with, and I'll define these. One is a get-in. A get-in, by pure definition, is a grouping of calls that starts from a static square and gets us somewhere to start. Okay? It takes us from a known phaser to a particular phaser that we've already said we want to start from a 0 line. I can get there real easy. My get-in might be heads lead to the right, circle to a line of 4. It might be something else. A 0 box is a particular place to start from. Most callers that I know that use modules work effectively from one of, let's see, 0 box, 0 line, across the street box, lead to the right box. These familiar with to you so far? I see a couple of heads going this way, and most of them going this way. So for those that are going this way, I'm on your wavelength right now. For the others, please bear with us. It'll only take a few seconds, and we'll be off this, and we'll transition into the meat and potatoes. A get-in is a group of modules or a group of calls that will take us from a static square to some place to start. We have another grouping of modules called a get-out. And obviously a get-out is the reverse. It will take us from some place where we know we're at back to home. There are calls also that group together that do something similar to another call. They're equivalent to another call. Now that's equivalent to competition. I hope this is not one. Those are voice lessons. I see. Okay. Must we project? An equivalent is a call that achieves the same choreographic equivalent to another call or another series of calls. They do the same. An equivalent is, say, I want to get from home or from a static square to a zero box. Everybody knows a square through will get us there. What is equivalent to a square through at mainstream? Touch a quarter, boys run. Right. Another. Promenade half, past the ocean, and extend. That'll get us to a zero box. Wave. See, the wheels are turning. The wheels are turning. What can I do that is equivalent to a square through? Obviously, if I start off every sequence from home with a square through, it's not going to take my dancers long to show me the exit. They're going to walk out quickly, and they probably won't come back. Equivalents offer us the opportunity to add variety in our calling, without adding too much complexity, I hope. Okay, say I get my dancers to my zero box by doing something exotic. And I want to insert a group of calls that will return them to those same footprints, or restore the same identical phaser. I want to make sure that the dancers end in a zero box. I can use what is referred to as a zero. A zero is this. It does absolutely nothing. John Jones was asked one time to identify a half zero when he was, I believe, when he was going through his caller coach accreditation. He was asked to define a half zero. And John says, the question was, what is a half zero? He says, nothing. And the question was repeated. No, this is serious. What is a half zero? John said, nothing. Half of nothing is nothing. Which didn't quite go over too well, but nonetheless, he passed the test. Zeros are calls or groups of calls that return the dancers to the same phaser that you left. If you can picture our zero box, if I call an 8-chain 4, I'm physically going to move the dancers from one location to another. They're going to leave the real estate that they were familiar with, and they're going to go somewhere else. But when they get there, they're going to be in the same identical position that they were before. The outside couple will be the sides if I activated the heads, and the inside couple would not be, the man would be facing his corner, and he would have the original opposite lady by his side. So a correct Alaman left would resolve the square. An Alaman left to a right and left grand would resolve the square. We would have no problems. That's what a zero does. It takes the dancers from a particular phaser, returns them to that same phaser. There are categories of zeros that we could go into. I'll touch on them briefly. A geographic zero is something that brings us back to the same footprints. A true zero is the one I identified. It may bring us somewhere else in the square, but the real estate may be a little different, but the particular phaser will be returned. Fractional zeros, half zero was a fractional zero. It has to be accomplished 2 times. You do it once, it does not restore the same identical phaser. But if you do it a second time, it will, and we refer to these as half zeros. There are fractional zeros, there are 1/3 zeros, 1/4 zeros, all kinds. of fractional zeros. And they're neat to get into and neat to play with because they interweave. If you take a 1/3 fractional zero that starts in a line, and you can do 1/3 of a fractional zero as long as you know where you're at. You could insert a line zero after that, a true zero, and then continue and do the second third of a 1/3 zero. Then go back and do another zero. Could be a true zero from a line instead of a geographic zero. Then you go back and finish up and do the third 1/3. But all this while, as long as you understand where you're at, modules give you the opportunity to be in total control of the dance situation. If you can understand what these little piles of blocks do, and a module is we've got a pile of building blocks. We take one, we set it on the ground, we take a second, we add to it, and then we build, and we go, and this is how modules work. This is, I think, what Norm is going to get into. I don't want to steal his thunder. Why would we ever want to consider using modules? One obvious reason for me, and what got me involved, not really involved because I grew up with modules. Modules were, I believe, invented around the time I started calling. They were identified, and they were grouped together, and I found them something I grew up with. I had to learn sight resolution when it came along. But I was in that wave of having started at a rather young age and continued throughout my career. I grew up with modules. Modules were part of my vocabulary from day one. But I found that the use of modules became very, very important when I stray away from my home environment. When I don't know the dancing ability of the people on the floor, I'm in a strange area, as I have been the last 2 weeks, and I may never get invited back again. So if you're working with an unfamiliar crowd, or if you're working with unfamiliar dancers that you don't know their ability, modules can become your ally. They can become a very, very true friend and help you out of situations that you can build yourself into or corner yourself into if you don't use modules. So there's a need for since the caller knows the particular phase or state that exists before and after, that caller is in total control. That one isn't. Yeah. When finished with a module, a caller selects another module that starts from the ending phaser of the module that he called previously. And in doing this, the stepping stone effect has that caller in total control of the dance situation. In the early 1970s, I had the opportunity to go on a military trip to Japan. And while I was there, a good friend of mine from Tokyo asked me if I would call a dance for their federation, which I did. And they wore club colors, matching outfits. And outside of sumo wrestlers, they all look alike. And I really had a difficult time trying to adapt to sight as a primary or as a secondary method of control. So I'll tell you what, my experience pocket was thick and used that day. I got into modules. I started using the chicken plucker. Ha ha. They changed songs. But I was in charge. And had I not understood modules, I would have been not in charge, but I would have been at the opposite end of the scale. I would have been a failure. I think we'll drop it there and pass the mic on to Cal.
All righty, let's pass it on to Norm, because he's going to cover the second section. I'm going to cover the third.
Thank you. As Al said, I write a note service, and, well, let me go back a little bit. I've been calling for about 38 years. Now, one thing I'm going to have to put a caveat out here. I was born and raised in England, and English people tend to talk quickly. And I get excited and get into something, my speed goes up. So if it gets beyond the point where you can't track, holler at me, and I'll slow down. So I was born and raised in England. I moved to Canada when I was 13, and I started calling in Canada in 1962, and been calling ever since. I call every program from basics, one-night stands, basics, through mainstream plus advanced, and now starting to play with challenge. I'm going the opposite direction of what you're going. And one of the things I'd like to address in the module, I'm basically a site caller. I started out using site before it was really clearly defined as the rules that we now have, all the guidelines that we have from CALLERLAB didn't exist, because that was back in 1962, and we had to sort of make things up as we went along. But I did start out as a site caller, and I still am a site caller primarily, and that's going to be my approach. For those of you that are module callers and don't use any site, you may have to modify some of the things I'm going to discuss with you slightly, and I'll get into that as to why. What I'm going to start out with is a phrase I use in the front page of my note service. Says, what am I doing now, and how can I change it to make it more interesting? One way is to use modules. Modules have a place, I think, in site calling, because when you're on the mic, as those of you, all of you put your hands up when Al asked if you've been to a caller school. You all have the experience where you've got the mic in your hand, you've got a square of dancers on the floor, and you've got an exercise you have to accomplish, and you get stuck. What do I go from here? Everybody in the room knows exactly what you should do, except you. Right? When you have a microphone in your hand, your brain freezes up. And so this sometimes happens when we as site callers get on the mic. We get into ruts. We get into doing things the same way every time because it works. And it's hard to think up new things when you're standing on the stage and responsible for controlling this dance. But where you can think up new things is when you're sitting at home with no dancers with time pressures, and you can sit down and generate ideas, steal ideas, but anyway, come up with ideas that are different, a little bit different, and then work them into your program. Al was talking about moving dancers from phaser to phaser, and phaser, of course, is an acronym for formation, arrangement, sequence, and relationship. And these are the four components that define any square dance arrangement of dancers. You can do this, and CALLERLAB has gone to great extent to name these. And one of the things I was going to do for you was to reproduce the formation and arrangement charts, and unfortunately it didn't happen, so I only have the only copy in the room, I guess. So we'll have to explain what I'm talking about when we get into some demonstrations. I would like to have a square up a little later to show some of these things. But going back to phaser, with site callers, we don't need to worry about sequence and relationship during the bulk of the sequence that we're calling, because we deal with that at resolution time. All we need to track and keep track of and worry about is formation and arrangement. So, also, Al mentioned there are setup modules, get out modules, setups, get-ins, zeros, equivalents, and conversions. I'm going to concentrate mainly on setups and conversion modules. And under the heading of setup modules, we usually think of getting into very common formations and arrangements, such as the zero box, which is what you get when you have heads square through 4, or a zero line, which is what you get when you have the heads lead right and circle to the line, and occasionally across the street and lead to the right boxes. and you probably have 10 ways to get there. I'd like to look at maybe some other formations, and within the formation, some other arrangements. And what I'm going to do is suggest that if you're going to create modules in this direction, that you need a theme to sort of work along. And one theme, there are thousands of them, and I've picked 2 or 3 as examples. One theme idea might be doing wheel and deal from lines of 4 using all 6 of the arrangements of lines of 4. Now, if you haven't been to a formation management session and had this diagram discussed, just briefly, what it does is it shows every formation, all the common formations, and in any given formation there are 6 and only 6 possible arrangements of boys and girls keeping the choreography symmetrical. There are only 6. There are no more. So we can take one theme might be wheel and deal, and we're going to set up 6 ways to get into lines of 4 to do this wheel and deal. Another one might be take a 2-face line and theme Ferris wheel, taking 6 arrangements of a 2-face line and setting up that 2-face line and then calling Ferris wheel. Another one might be to take a quarter tag. Now, in plus dancing, in mainstream dancing, we don't use quarter tag much except to have heads pass the ocean and extend as a way to get to parallel waves. And in plus, if you say heads pass the ocean, what's the next call that most dancers think you're going to call? Ping pong circulate. Okay, so why not use that as a theme idea? Let's take the quarter tag, set up the 6 arrangements that are identified, and call ping pong circulate. This is going to generate some interesting dancing. Now, you may not get to do all 6 in any one given dance because you may run into a wall where the level of difficulty has risen to the point where your dancers are starting to struggle. No problem. You can save that for later. But you set out to set these up, and you have the modules already worked out in such a way that it's interesting to get in. And then once you've done the ping pong circulate, you have the option of using a module to get out or sight resolving to get out back to home. The other one I'd like to look at is a formation that isn't used a whole lot, and that's a 3-in-1 line. And 3-in-1 lines by themselves tend to be somewhat difficult, but they can be managed. And one of the neat things about 3-in-1 lines is that no matter what you set up in a 3-in-1 line, you can always get out of a 3-in-1 line by using the call tag the line or half tag the line. There are a couple little caveats in that. It will work legally from every 3-in-1 line, but it will work very well only from 3-in-1 lines where the centers are both facing the same direction or the centers have right hands joined. If they have left hands joined, the body flow for the tag the line leaves a lot to be desired. And this is why we don't use tag the line from right-hand ocean waves. We can use them from left-hand waves, but not from right. So one of the things you might think about writing modules for is to set up 3-in-1 lines so that you can call tag the line. And then possibly moving along that path, you might want to get into 3-in-1 lines where you can call all 8 circulate, which is sort of the whole point of setting up a 3-in-1 line is to have them circulate, because this is very interesting circulate. I think what I'd like to do at this point is to, if I can, get us set up, and we'll just run quickly through a couple of these ideas to sort of see it in motion and might bring it home to you. So could we get a set of 4 boys and 4 girls, if you would, please? Could be... Okay, I'm going to just run through a couple of ideas in the handouts, and at the end of the session, I'll have a pile of handouts here. I tend to get when I start writing stuff, I tend to keep going, and as Al said, there's about, I don't know how many pages I ended up with, 8, and a lot of them are examples. So there's all kinds of examples in here of how I think. You may not think the same way, but it gives you maybe a starting point and some ideas to carry on with. Okay, so the first idea I mentioned was setting up different formations to do wheel and deal. obviously we can all get to zero line, and probably those of you that are module callers have already have a dozen ways to get to a zero line without saying heads lead to the right and circle 4 and break to 1. So let's look at setting up a half line, and a half line is a line where the dancers are half sashayed. So let's have the heads pass the ocean and extend. Girls trade for flow, girls run, and bend the line. And one of the things which I do when I write this kind of stuff is I kind of don't want the dancers to really twig what's going on until the last minute if possible. So I start out by setting out heads past the ocean and not really thinking about lines, I'm thinking about ocean waves, and then I kind of sneak the line into them. And this way adds a little bit of interest to it. They're not really always going to set up a line of 4. I can tell this right off the bat. Could we have the head square back up, set square back up again, please? Just to keep everything straight. Because we all start, at least all start from home. Now, a number 2 line is a line where we have 2 boys together and 2 girls together, with the boys on the right-hand end. I'm speeding up, I can tell. Let me slow down. Heads star through. I should take John Jones lessons. Pass through. Touch a quarter. Make a wave on the center's trade. Center's run. We have our same sex together. Let's bend the line. And we have a number, what is referred to as a number 2 line, but it's a girl-girl, boy-boy line. And this is one of our 6 arrangements for doing the wheel and deal. And of course, we then go pass through wheel and deal, and we carry on from there. But we're just looking at the setup at the moment. Could you get back home, please? The second idea I mentioned was, I have one more, which I call left turn. I woke up with this one. I tend to dream a lot sometimes in choreography, and I wake up with these ideas.
That's never happened to me.
Never happened to you?
No.
See if you can see where I'm going with this. Head square through 4 hands. And this is a very common thing for dancers to have called to them. Then swing through. Boys run. What are they looking for? Ferris wheel or wheel and deal or bend the line or couple circulate. Let's give them a couple circulate. Then the sequence, I say, takes a left turn. Girls walk and dodge. Girls run. Boys walk and dodge. Boys partner trade. We have the line. Girl, boy, boy, girl, line. Now, there are other ways of getting there. You swing through, boys run, tag the line, face in, does it? But what I thought of, well, this is kind of neat because there's no suggestion that I'm heading for a line when I start out. And until the last minute, the line isn't apparent. So I thought it was kind of a neat sequence. I like that. I even wrote it down on a card. Okay, square your set, please, if you would. Thank you. Yeah, that could be, because, again, I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a sight caller. What I did was I set up an ocean wave, so I had the swing through boys run a couple circulate. So up to that point, we've done nothing which we haven't called a million times. It's just the last part is where where we go from that part, where the centers walk and dodge, centers run, new centers walk and dodge, and partner trade is really the essence of the module. And because I'm looking at it from the standpoint of a sight caller, I'm not worrying about who is where individually, which girls with which boy. Because I'll deal with that later.
We need to have the question repeated, or you need to be up here on a mic.
Yeah, the question was, what was the original question? Is this, that whole thing, would you consider that a module? And you got my answer to that. Second question was, do you give this a name? I just gave this one a left turn name just for the sake of something to call it here, because I thought where the thing takes a left turn is kind of what it does in my head. If I were making a collection of these, I would probably give it a name so I can remember it, or I might not. Just depends on how your mind works. Back in the old days, and both Al and I guess Cal all go back to the days when callers all had notebooks with all these things written down, and they all had names. Every sequence had a name, and we don't do that so much anymore.
Here's Cal's notebook.
Well, it's a setup module. It's a setting up a line of 4. So the main package would be setting a setup, a line of 4 setup, and I would tag it with a number. What did I say it was? I forget what the number of the line was now. One or a 2, or it's boy, girl, boy. So it's a 3 or a 4 facing line of 4. So I would tag it that way. I probably. And I'm going to describe, I'm going to mention what I would do with this, or what I would think you might want to do with this, how to use all this stuff once we get sort of down into creating it first. And then now you create it, now we're going to do with it. How are we going to inject it into our programs? So I'll kind of come back to you in a little while. Okay. The second one was two-phase line. And, of course, we all know how to set up a 0 two-phase line, which is a right-handed two-phase line, that is, with boy on the left, girl on the right, normal couples, heads square through 4, swing through, boys run. We've got, don't do that. But how about a number 1 two-phase line? A number 1 two-phase line has boys together and girls together. So heads square through 4, or just pair off heads. Yeah, touch a quarter, centers trade. That puts our same sex together. Centers run. It takes us from the wave to a two-phase line, and we've got what we want. And again, I don't care who's with who, because I'm being a cyclone, I'm going to deal with this at resolution time. I've got my line that I want. Let's have the. Can we swear this back up again, please? Notice that when I'm using might be called extended application of, or going into other arrangements of these formations, other than the zero arrangement, I use a lot of touch a quarter or single hinge or cast off 3/4. This is the most powerful call we have in our arsenal, our toolbox, for doing this kind of choreography, because in an instant we've gone from, for instance, head couple step forward and pass the ocean, if you would please, and extend. We got a normal ocean wave, boy and girls in the middle. Do a single hinge. And immediately, in a heartbeat, we've now created a different kind of wave entirely by doing that. So the single hinge and touch a quarter and cast off 3/4 all accomplish somewhat the same thing. They turn it by a quarter and immediately get into non-standard choreography, which is a problem that we had back in the old days. We didn't have touch a quarter. Square your set, please. Okay, this one. That's a quarter tag one. Okay. That's a tag. Okay. All right. Going on to the quarter tag. And this is all documented in my handout, by the way, in more examples than I'm giving you here. And just give me one or two, I think, more interesting ones. Let's set up a number 2 quarter tag. And just briefly, it's where we have the 4 boys in the middle and girls on the outside. So heads lead right, veer left. Couples circulate. I'm going to use a plus call because I'm going to do a ping pong circulate. 3/4 tag the line. Immediately puts the boys together. Boys swing through, and while they're doing that, girls partner trade. So I did that in that order, so the timing would come out so that the dance continues to flow as much as possible. And here we are set up in a number 2 quarter tag, and we can now call ping pong circulate from here. This is one of the 6 arrangements. Let's have the everybody square back up, please. Now, a number 3 quarter tag is kind of a simple setup. It's where the outside couple is normal and the inside ocean wave has the girls on the end. Now, there's a real quick way of setting that up, isn't there? Heads pass the ocean and swing through. Everybody agree with that? Nod your head. Up and down. Okay. So, if you did that, you're kind of tipping your hand. If that's okay, But if you want to kind of keep it a surprise, then you might want to go at it something like this. Heads pass through in cloverleaf. Sides come in and swing through. Simple, but it kind of went the other way. It didn't really think of a quarter tag coming out of this series of calls. And if you'd square back up, I got one more I'd kind of like to run by you. This is kind of getting into some choreography which may require you to do some workshopping. Having thought of this sequence, or something like this sequence, you may have to spend some time and play with the calls you want to use. Okay, let's have the heads lead right, veer left, and bend the line. Touch a quarter. Let's have the ends trade and roll while the centers do a single hinge and fan the top. The ends star through. I left out a call. And we've got a 0 tag, quarter tag. The same arrangement we would have if I had called heads past the ocean. See what I'm doing? But I got there in a kind of a devious way. I didn't want to tip my hand. I'm going into a quarter tag. I wanted to let them think of anything else but a quarter tag, and so I went this direction. And I thought it was kind of neat. Okay, go ahead, square your set back up, please, if you would. Getting on to 3-in-1 lines. Again, setups to get to a 3-in-1 line, and I'm looking for a 3-in-1 line where I can do a tag the line easily and without a lot of dancer fudging. Heads pass the ocean, extend, girls trade, and the girls run. Boys walk and dodge. That maybe sets up our 3-in-1 line. We've got 3 facing out, 1 facing in, and that's one of the 3-in-1 lines. I think a total of 8 possibilities, because you have the dancer who is facing the different direction in one of 4 spots and could be facing either in or out. So to me that says there's 8 possible, 3-in-1 lines that you can generate. This one has the centers facing out. So for them, a tag the line is easy because this is just like, for them, it's the same as if I called lines of 4 pass through and tag the line. The ends don't really care because there's enough distance between them and the center that they can make any adjustment they need to make in a nice, easy curve. They don't have to make any abrupt changes of direction. Let's do a tag the line, if you would. And we're out of our 3-in-1 line into a completed double pass through. We can carry on from there. Okay, let's square your set back up. One more to look at, if you would. Head step forward and face your corner. Touch a quarter. Make a wave in the center's trade. Just the center boy, run. And again, we have a 3-in-1 line. Okay, we could tag the line from here quite easily. Okay, but let's add what we're getting to in introducing the 3-in-1 lines of the all 8 circulate. And of course you would explain the circulate paths and the fact that dancers are passing each other as part of your introduction. But however, we've now got them in the setup. We do the all 8 circulate. Presumably we've taught them how to do this. Now the centers are both facing the same direction, so now we can do our tag the line. So we tag the line and we're out. And I'll carry on with our resolution. Okay, square your set, if you would please. Just want to show you one more before I move into I'm out of time. Oh dear. Okay, let me skip that then and go into. I'd like to just kind of 4 minutes. Okay. The other section I want to look at was conversions, and conversions where you convert from one phaser to another. And the exercise that occurred to me was, why not take this sheet, and you can all get these from the main head office, and if you look across the top, you have the formations listed across the top, the arrangements down the side. So you start and set up, and you write a setup for each of those formation arrangements. That's 30 of them. And then you start and you write modules which convert the arrangement, the formation to formation to formation to formation across the page. You can then do that. And taking the exercise to its logical conclusion, you do that for every arrangement. And then to further enhance the choreography, you could start at the top and go diagonally down the page. And I've covered some of that in my handout. Let's just quickly go through one of these, and I'll try and do as fast as I can. I'm going to use the number 3, which is the boys on the end, girls in the center lines, and go through a number 3 8-chain through a trade by and a right-hand wave. So this is going to be a long, long sequence. You wouldn't want to call this as a sequence at your dance, but these are samples of conversion modules that I thought of. Head star through, double pass through, centers in, cast off 3/4, pass through, wheel and deal, zoom, boys square through 3, centers in, centers run. There's a number 3 line. Pass through. Tag the line. Face in. Pass through. Wheel and deal. Double pass through. Leaders partner trade. This is the number 3 8-chain through. Boy facing boy, girl facing girl. Touch a quarter. Centers trade. Centers run. Ferris wheel. Centers square through 3. Everybody pass through. Of course, you wouldn't stop here because this is a trade by, but I wanted to pause and show this is the number 3 trade by. Okay, carrying on, trade by. Make an ocean wave, swing through. Centers trade. And we have a number 3 right-hand wave. Swing through again. Ends circulate while the centers trade. The centers run. And the couples circulate. And that's our last one, which is the number 3 two-phase line. Okay, Ferris wheel, hope I'm right here. Centers pass through, make a wave, swing through. Single hinge, boys trade, girls turn back, promenade home. Whoa, it worked. So obviously you wouldn't want to call that sequence in one long chunk. So what would you do with it? Okay, what I'm suggesting that is a possibility is you take this sheet, as I said before, write a setup for each of these little boxes in here. You write conversion modules to move from one to the other. And while you're learning these modules, I would suggest you put the setups on some cards, put them on the table and use one until it becomes knowledge. Pair it up with a conversion and use that until it becomes knowledge. You probably won't ever cover the entire page on your dances, but I think the exercise of doing it is going to make you think. And what you come up with in doing that is going to stick with you, even though you may not remember the details of the modules. The ideas you generate will stick, and you can use them in calling your dances, and I think make for more interesting dances. Thank you very much.
All righty. I kind of look at this as going from the, and he's on the esoteric end. We're all on curves. In sight calling or in modular calling or anything else, we basically are all following some sort of a curve. And some of us are going to stop at different places on that curve and say, this is fine, this satisfies what I need to do my calling. I envy people like Norm because he has the ability to be able to stretch this, frankly, way beyond from what I did. I started out as a memory caller. My calling experience was in the early 50s, and when modules came along, I thought I'd been given mana. I mean, it was wonderful. Now I had this thing to where I could break it down and do things in groups rather than to have to memorize an entire routine from front to back. And so I got very interested in this whole thing, and I ended up writing a couple of books, and I wrote a column for Sets in Order for about, I think it was 5 years, before they shut down, because I just became fascinated with the whole thing. Basically, at this point in time, yes, I'm a sight caller, but I use modules extensively because they're my storage places for ideas. For those of you who got the little sheet, 20 minutes about modules, I set certain limitations on myself in order to be able to set up the storage methods in books or in notes or something that would be consistent. And one of the things that I set for myself was the fact that my observation was that we go through 3 different formations time after time after time. We go from a static set to either a 0 box or a 0 line. And so that seemed neat. I mean, we're going to pass through this. The arrangement within the line, in terms of people, may be different. We go from a line to another line, or a line to a box, or a box to a line, but we go through the formations of either an 8 chain through, or a static square, or facing lines of 4. So arbitrarily for myself, for my sanity, I guess is the best way to put it, I said, fine, I'm going to use these as organization points. And I'm going to set up all kinds of configurations built around themes of calls that I picked through the mainstream and the plus list to go to a 0 box or a 0 line. That's my discipline. That's my goal. I'm going to set up some more to go from a 0 line to another 0 line, or from a 0 box to another 0 box. That's my goal. And then I'm going to try and see if I can't figure out some innovative ways using that same theme to get out of the formation back to a static square. I set up a second limitation on myself in order to be able to have a way of being able to become efficient and to practice my mind. And that was the fact that I said the limitation should be 7 or less, a max of 9, and preferably less. There was a way of disciplining how I organize myself. And if you think about it, if you're good at resolving, you can resolve very, very quickly. And this is how I organize my database. Now this gives me a place where I can go down to the local dance and listen to one of these 2 gentlemen, and they've got an idea. And something pops up and I think, oh, gee, that was neat. Piece of movement. I grab the core of it and go back and organize it into a setup, some zeros, and some get outs. In the process, it becomes mine. As I do this, as I study it, and one of the things I brought along is I've got little checkers that I use, or little T-bars that I've made that I can move that end up in the case. And lately I've been using a product called Square Dance Action, and I brought it along here. The neat thing about Square Dance Action, it lets me watch the movement to see whether I like the flow. You know, when you're doing things with checkers, every once in a while you miss something on flow. If you can set it up and let it run and then watch the flow, you'll oftentimes pick up something that you don't pick up in your head right away. So this becomes something that helps, all right? I have a lousy memory. I've always had a lousy memory. If I don't have notes and stuff around that I can sit and review when I'm planning a dance, I'll have things that are treasures that I will eventually forget that I'll never be able to dredge back up. The pearls that I want to have, and so I want to keep these things. And what I did was, you know, you go through good productions like this. This is one of the early ones that was done, and I think this is still available. It's called Modules Galore by Bill Peters. And it was full of lots of treasures that I needed to put in, and Modules Galore and Psych Calling is the other one that's done by Bill Peters, and I think these are both still there. The first one was done by a guy called Lloyd Littman. It's called Instant Hash. And I also have a little deal called Shredded Hash. And you go through and you dredge these ideas out. Well, as you use them, they become part of your repertory. And just like the other two people here, they become wonderful for being able to bail your tail out of a jam. I got to keep remembering I'm going on tape. Now, and so if I go down to a dance and I start a dance, about the first 2 or 3 tips, I'm working with modules. In the meantime, I'm locating my key couples, who I can depend on. I'm also locating the people that if they're in a square, maybe I want to switch my square, right? Okay, if I get into trouble in the middle of a set and my little old key set down there has suddenly gone to the dogs, I switch to modules, because I know they work. I also use them to make sure that I'm providing variety during the night. I go through a particular night of calling and I write, you know, I grew up in an era when we had theme tips. And I honestly still believe it's a very excellent way to call. But, you know, I'm getting old and kind of, you know, thin here and there and fat other places. But I really find it's a way to call. And this way I go in and I have the modules laid out and my theme tips laid out. And I know that I've provided variety in the following areas throughout the night, and I haven't left some holes. I use it in terms of building from one tip to the next. In other words, the themes of what I use in the early tips may lead on to something in the later tips, based on whether the dancers are absorbing it, that will be a great deal more complex. It's a way of keeping me organized, because if I didn't, I would be rather, in my particular style of calling, I would be very unorganized. Make sense? Okay, you've got 2 printouts that are down there, or 2 little sheets that I gave you, and for those that don't have it, would you please share it with your neighbor? I also use this to go in and for myself to solve problems, or at least set up maybe ways that I could solve problems. One of the problems that we had in Colorado, and I think as far as I know we still have, if you do a swing through and a center's run, they're going to Ferris wheel without you even talking to them about it. I mean, they are just going to do it. And so it becomes fun for me to go sit down with the programmer, the checkers, and take a look at all the things we could do besides the Ferris wheel. And on that one sheet, I've got a list of 19 that are sitting there. Well, one of my other goals is also to take people and to move them around in the formation so that you're not always stuck with the same people in the same place. And one of my own personal theories is if you change the formation or change the position of the dancers rotated within the set, it looks different. And so if you go down through there, you're going to find 2 that say rotate the square 90 degrees counterclockwise. Or clockwise, excuse me. And then the other one is rotate the square 90 degrees counterclockwise. That's done on purpose. You know, when I'm sitting there trying to construct these things, I try and turn that set. so that the people aren't always in the same place on the floor where they're doing the module. If you go on down a little bit further, you're going to get a bunch of them that are labeled right at the end with an FF. It flip-flops the set. And you can probably mentally follow these things pretty good through their mind, but I purposely want to turn that set around 180 degrees so that the dancers are doing the figure from a different position on the floor without having to do a cross-the-street box. In the process, of course, I'm also trying to study the flow to see whether it flows to the place where I'm satisfied with it. And when you start constructing these things, you're going to find a lot of things that when you get into them, you're going to say, boy, that sucked. You know, I'm trying to do it on the fly off the top of my head. The dancers look at me and say, boy, that sucked. Beep. That's all right. I'll get this and I'll be able to cut those out. All right? Okay, with the idea Poro Cal has a limitation on his memory and wants to do it the easiest possible way, I'm going to extend on to something that Norm did. And this is take a look at things called fractional zeros, and a zero is a zero is a zero. One of the neat things about writing zeros that go from a zero box to another zero box is that they are also zeros for every intermittent fissure or formation setup. And I'd like to kind of have you mentally follow through the top. And let's start at the top at two facing lines of 4. Typical 1P, 2P, or what we call a zero box. Move to the right, pass through, wheel and deal, double pass through, first couple left, next couple right. Y'all use that? I bet you do. Okay, let's say I want another zero. If I go down to the point of where you are in a double pass-through formation and stop putting the arrows going around the other side, centers pass through, swing through, centers run, Ferris wheel, then I have what? I have a zero for a double pass-through formation. Double duty, single memory. Okay? Let's flip this over, and we're going to take a look at a very nice memorizable fractional zero that uses wheel and deal and centers in and cast off 3/4. If you follow this same routine through 3 times, pass through, wheel and deal, double pass through, centers in and cast off 3/4, it's going to zero out at the end of the 3rd time. This is why it's called a fractional zero. You have to go through the 3 fractions before you're going to get out of it. Now, if we step in the middle of it, at the point where we have a double pass-through formation and have the centers pass through, swing through, centers run, and Ferris wheel, we know it works because we know a zero is a zero is a zero. As you go through the combinations of this particular figure, you're going to do the same thing that Norm does with his setups. You're going to go through half of the arrangements of putting girls on the end, boys in the center, half sashayed, etc., etc. And where he does it with all the innovative choreography, Poro Cal's got to stick with memory. I need to have a module that's going to do that for me. The other one that works, will put you through the other half, is pass through, wheel and deal, centers, do a U-turn back, do a centers in, cast off 3/4, do it 3 times, it gets you the other 6 combinations. Where do I use this? Use it at dances, and I certainly use it at classes. You know, it's where I am on the curve. I'm not as far as he is. And so what I have to have is something that's going to allow me to provide variety to my dancers without that being an aspect. And it's been a lifesaver to me. You know, at this point in time, I checked the database just before I left home, and at this point in time, I've got about 1,500 of these things that I've kept. And Lord knows how many I've thrown away. But I got about 1,500 of these things that I've kept. All right. When I first started out with this thing, and you can pass this around, this book is out of print, but if you're still not seeing the concept, this was the original way that both Lloyd Littman and I did. I thought I invented something unique. And I put this book together, and it has all these little split pages, and I thought, boy, that's good. And then I figured out how hard it was to keep up and put together. And it just became impossible. So it eventually became this thing, and you're welcome to take these things and leaf through them, and I think Supreme Audio's got them. But this one has got, within this little slow set of pages, about 400 modules. And I have never gotten to the stage with using this little set of memory for me, I mean it's my memory in a book, to where I have had an opportunity to call all 400. For one thing, some of the material that's in here, frankly, are calls that we have dropped, but a lot of it has to do with the fact that I seldom find dancers that can handle the complexity of some of the modules. They're there. They're material that if I find on a particular night I've got a real good group I can do. They are great for workshops where you can get them ahead of the evening's program. And you can take and build on a theme. I mean, they're there, and so you've got the opportunity to do it. I picked up from another caller, and I know some people frown at this, but I also keep stuff on cards. And my cards have got the theme for the tip running across the top of the tip. And for instance, this is a bunch of modules based around the idea of doing different things with the centers and the ends. And this gives me the opportunity to go in, maybe in the middle of the night, where my program has not gone as I have planned, either good or bad, and sit down and grab this between the tips and take a look at this thing, and I understand my own shorthand, you probably won't, and say, okay, I think I can do that with this group. And it only takes me a very little period of time because my particular memory works very well with groups of 7 ideas or figures, basics, or 9. 9's about as much as I can handle mentally. But if it's anything up to 7 or 9, I can look down here and grab this suddenly and lay it back down and go out and get on the floor and call it. Look at it as an aid to your mind. Look at it as a way to build discipline. In the years, I have learned a tremendous amount about choreography of how to move people purely by moving the dolls. That I'm sure I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't gone through the exercise. It's homework. And a lot of times, it's hard homework. I mean, you just sit there and you dig and you scratch. But boy, it's good homework from the standpoint of when it does get on the floor, it's like his get out. I mean, when he got that get out and it came out, you see him, wow, neat. And that really helps. I mean, it makes a tremendous amount of difference. It helps the dancers because if you do this and you put them through the paces and they see this stuff in an organized basis, they're going to become better dancers, in my opinion. A lot better dancers. One of the things that we used to do an awful lot in square dancing that we sometimes get away from is we tend to forget that we have 8 people in the set. And each of us is dancing with 3 other couples. And sometimes we never get to see them. We get into a set and we start into sight calling, and we end up in a position where we're always working with the same people. We're never very far from the corner. And sometimes we have to take on a discipline to say, we're going to go across the street. You all understand what across the street is. We're going to go across the street and dance with that other couple. And if you're good at doing it sight call wise, I praise you. I'm not. I have to do it as a conscious effort, and modules are my medium for doing so. We're down to the place where I've almost used up my 20 minutes, and we're down to the place where we can open it up for questions or comments from the other guys at this point. Well, yeah, now, coming. You know the rules. You were in another one of my sessions.
When you say the 7 or 9, you mean 7 or 9 calls or
7 or 9 calls? Up to 7 to 9 calls.
Now, everything I listen to is excellent. The only thing I need to know now is how you actually do it when you're up behind a microphone. Do you have cue cards? Like when I went to Jamboree, I watched one of the callers had a notebook, and he did like a module theme in the middle, and he was reading the lines.
No, I don't.
So can you tell me how...
These are memory clumps. I can read in between tips if I need to, if I can't recall them. I can read in between tips, and then when I get into the tip, that usually goes back in the box.
Some callers read. And now what's your opinion on that? I think it just depends on each caller's comfort factor.
That's right. And where they are along the curve.
But I think a module theme in every tip should be included along. I think it's a combination of sight and modules.
Sure.
I think that works real well.
Yeah. Personally, I use modules to set up a particular phaser to go from somewhere to somewhere. Once I get there, I may elect to shift into sight gear. And sight calling will take me to a certain point, and I will return the dancers to a recognizable phaser, one that I can see on the fly. Once I get there, then I go back and convert back or go back into the module stage. Most of my modules are categorized as spicy get-outs. They're memorized through practice. They initially started by jotting them down and having them available. And as I would work in a class environment, I would commit at least one spicy get-out to memory per class or per class evening. And by doing this, I've got a backlog of memorized modules that I can just pick from specific phasers. Okay. While Norm was going through his presentation here, a buzzword came to my mind that I use quite frequently. And when I transition from module to sight, this is where I use modules that I call the wind in the face module. When I'm playing with the degree of difficulty knob for complexity, not complexity, but variety in a specific way, I want to add a little challenge at some point in my presentation. I want to give the dancers something more than vanilla-flavored ice cream. I want to give them something different. So I may crank up the degree of difficulty factor a wee bit to test, to see how far they can go. And then I want to get completely out of that mode as quickly as possible and do a couple of things that will put them, all of them, in motion. If you can picture a two-face line, do a Ferris wheel, centers sweep a quarter, the others lead to the right. The flow is impeccable, and every dancer is moving, and then you can repeat that again, and every dancer has it from the other side of the fence. Those that were in-facers are now out-facers. Swing through, boys run. Ferris wheel, centers sweep a quarter, the others lead to the right. Repeat, swing through, centers run, Ferris wheel, centers sweep a quarter, the others lead to the right. And the flow is impeccable. Everybody's working together, and these are the modules that I want when my needle is pinging in yellow and red, I want to bring that needle into the green zone quickly. And this is how I use modules to enhance or to complement sight. I use the two of them together along with memory. I use 3 different methods of control, all at the same time.
Want to add any comments?
Just a sec. I'd like to address that as well. How do I use this stuff? I use it a slightly different way. I will take, because again I'm primarily a sight caller, I will take one of these little 3x5 file cards. I'll put down an idea, or maybe a collection of ideas that I want to use, and these are my themes for that particular tip. And then over the years, things have stuck in my head and become knowledge. Now, what's happened is that doing the work for this presentation has made me go back and look at some of these things, and maybe I should rediscover some things I haven't been doing. That one with the what I call the left turn figure, I'm going to put that in my case. And what I'll do if I find something like that is I'll put it on a card, put it on the table, and I'll maybe read it a couple of times, and eventually it will become knowledge. And I'll be able to use it, and I'll have it in my head. I guess that's pretty much it. I use, if I've got a crowd that I don't know, I will use things I know work. Again, they may not be what we have been talking about as actual modules, but they will be ideas I know that the floor can handle. I'll put it together in a way that I like. I love to dance smooth choreography, so I think I like to call smooth choreography most of the time. And I like to have it, as Al mentioned, the wind in the face factor going heavily in the first couple of tips. Easy material and things they can do, and I'm watching what's going on and making judgments as to how far I can maybe go with some of these things. And then I'll use things I've known. For instance, if I want to set up diamonds, I know that if I do a certain number of things, and I'll end up with a 3-in-1 line, for instance, with the boys in the middle facing in, the girls on a right-hand progression. I have the boys pass the ocean. I have normal diamonds. That would be one of my, maybe on one of my theme cards, and I'll glance down at that and I'll start working with it. And I'll have to check out if the boys can do it past the ocean. Maybe they can, maybe they can't. And if they can't, then of course that idea goes out the window. It goes something else. So I guess I don't use the modules as such from beginning to end the way maybe Al and Cal does, but I use the ideas of the setup that we use, just the formation and the arrangements that I want, and then I use sight to fill in the gaps and resolve.
Would you please give your name?
Yes, I'm John Geen from San Angelo, Texas, and I thought I would mention something that I failed to hear mentioned here. And modules I use a lot of modules, but there's two ways to use modules. You can memorize them, or what I call visualize them. What's the difference? If you memorize a module, you know where you're starting from, you know where you're going to end, but you memorized what's in between. If you visualize these modules, you know at any point during these modules exactly where these people are going to be. So if you want to interrupt it at some point, you can do it. Or if somebody makes a mistake out on the floor, then you got the opportunity to correct it. So the difference between memorizing and visualizing to me is very important. Now, there's certain modules which you may not use often. Yeah, you're going to memorize them, but try and remember this visualization. At some point in time, at any point in time, you'll know exactly where they're going to be. Thank you.
I think that isn't that what Don Beck calls mental image to a certain degree. I kind of have two minds about that. My personal opinion, if you can memorize module, do you really care what goes on in between? Because usually modules are very, as Cal said, they're short, 7 to 9 calls in his case. If the majority of the floor goes down in the middle of this module, of course, then you've got to get out real quick. But if it doesn't, do you really care? Because you know what's going to happen 7 calls from the start, you're going to be in this particular formation arrangement. That's my personal opinion.
I would tend to feel I care very much what goes on in between, because the kernel of what I want to accomplish is usually built in with that module. Agreed? Okay. Other questions from the standpoint, are you with us? In other words, have we gotten too far afield to the place where it's not understandable? Gee, you're quiet. Usually I figure these last 10 minutes are going to be filled with all kinds of ideas and questions. Okay, let me put one more idea out for you from the standpoint that we are in a period of time with our dancers to the place where we have a lot of pressures on us as to what direction we should go. Modular calling and theme calling. Tips build around themes, either themes being basics or themes having to do with patterns that we move people, has kind of fallen out of favor to just kind of opening up your jaws and whatever comes out. Maybe this isn't as good as we think it is. My gut feeling about people is, almost without exception, every form of team dance that I can name around the world is built around routines. And they're built around routines that people tend to memorize, not necessarily to know the team from the memory's purpose, but they aren't surprised. You ever think about why people like spin chain through the gears? Because it's a memorized routine that once they get in, they know where they're going to end up. All right? Let me give you one more little thing. I have a thought that I go through in terms of planning my tips that's called the view from above. And Mrs. Shaw, Tappy Shaw's wife, used to tell us that if you can't make a good-looking doodle out of it, it ain't worth dancing. And her point was that what you should do is take and look down from right on top of the square, right above it, and follow the track that various dancers follow. And if that track's all over here in a lump, it doesn't look very good. But if that track eventually ends up going over here and then over there, and by the time you get done with the tip, it's got a pretty pattern, it probably was fun to dance. Why? Because the wind is in your face and you're moving and you're dancing rather than walking. And modules are a marvelous discipline. A lot of times I will call a module in an 8-chain through 0 box and then do something to transition the set over to where I'm across the street and do exactly the same module. And I know that there are some areas where I would be criticized for this because the dancers in that particular mode want to have something different all the time. Most of the time I get a very positive response. And people say, oh, that's nice. Sometimes when I put them through a module, they will not quite get it. It'll be just there and they, oh, you can just see the pinched brows. Do it again. Oh, that's what you meant. Neat. You know, repetition is not necessarily wrong. It's letting the dancer win. If I'm doing things like this little one we did where they're in 3/4 and you're doing different combinations of people and they succeed, do it again. In other words, if you do it for the heads, do it for the sides. For one thing, they're not going, you know, they're an entirely different combination. Once you've done it for the heads and you do the same module for the sides, they're in different positions. But they do have a little bit of an idea of what's coming up. And this gives them a comfort level to me. And when I can see the shoulders coming back and the smiles on the faces, instead of crouching down and they're starting to relax, then that's dancing. Just thoughts. Any other comments, gentlemen? I hope you've enjoyed it. Please give a big hand to Norm and Al. Cal. Yeah. If any of you want to come on up, I took all the ones that I worked out. I worked out all of the stuff that I had here for what you do without a Ferris wheel. And if you want to, we can come up, you can play with it and run the program, and you can watch the flow.
Pardon me?